The sulphurous jungles of Zios boiled under a heavy yellow fog. The air was thick, sharp in the lungs, burning like acid every time a man tried to breathe. Dead trees clawed at the sky, their bark turned to stone over centuries of storms and poisons. The jungle floor hissed where rain struck, puddles sizzling as if alive. It was no place for a human, no place for anyone. And yet Cale Lockhart crawled out of a half-buried escape pod and into this hell. The pod's hull was blackened from entry, its once white metal warped and bubbled. Cale stumbled as the hatch slammed shut behind him. His tall frame bent against the heat and the stench, a cough tearing through his chest. His jumpsuit, once a crisp Stellar Resources uniform, hung in tatters, dark stains of grease, sweat, and dried blood painting him like a ruin. He spat to the ground, and the spit fizzed on contact with the soil. "Perfect," he muttered, voice muffled as he pulled his cracked filtration mask over his face. Moisture immediately fogged its inside. Just perfect. Cale had spent 20 years as a corporate geologist. He was trained to read mountains, to find the veins of ore hidden in the bones of alien worlds. He knew how to listen to rock, how to calculate a planet's heartbeat. But now, on Zios, none of that mattered. There was no company ship to extract him, no resources to map, no rescue coming. Stellar Resources would already have filed his name under acceptable loss and moved on. He tapped his wrist-mounted scanner. The screen flickered, cracked from the crash. It gave him 3 words he already knew: no signal. Cale wiped the sweat from his brow, though it only smeared the grime. He straightened, eyes like steel scanning the foggy wilderness. His instincts whispered what his training confirmed. The jungle was alive, but not in any way he wanted. Shapes moved in the mist. The sound of something breathing, too large, too close, echoed faintly. His hand went to the pistol holstered at his side, the only piece of corporate equipment still intact. And then came the sound that changed everything. A scream, high, sharp, and desperate. Not human, not animal, something in between. It cut through the fog, carrying pain and fury at once. Cale froze, finger brushing the trigger. Every corporate rule shouted in his head: avoid contact, don't interfere, preserve resources, people are replaceable. But that scream came again, louder, closer. Against every instinct, against every rule drilled into him, Cale ran toward it. The clearing was a nightmare. A massive plant, its trunk like a writhing serpent, its leaves like serrated knives, had trapped its prey. Tangled in its glistening tendrils was a figure, not human. A woman-shaped being, skin glowing like polished jade, long black hair woven with metallic threads. She slashed wildly at the tendrils with a curved bone knife, her amber eyes blazing with rage rather than fear. The plant tightened, dragging her toward a central maw lined with translucent, needle-like teeth. Acid dripped from them, sizzling as it struck her skin. Cale raised his pistol. His hands were steady, but his chest was tight. This wasn't his fight. This wasn't his problem. But those eyes, their fire, their defiance, hit something deep in him, something buried beneath years of corporate cynicism. "Damn it all," he hissed and fired. 3 kinetic bursts cracked through the clearing. The plant convulsed, its main stalk severed in an instant. Its tendrils spasmed, loosening their grip. The woman collapsed onto the ground, gasping, clutching her bleeding leg. Her amber eyes fixed on him, full of shock, suspicion, and reluctant recognition. Cale lowered his pistol. "You're welcome," he muttered. But the fog stirred. More shadows emerged, silent as ghosts. A dozen women stepped into view, their skin shades of jade, emerald, and forest green. Their bodies bore ritual scars, fresh and old alike, and their armor was made from bone and metal scraps. Each one held a spear tipped with crystal. All those spears now aimed directly at Cale's chest. The rescued woman staggered to her feet, leaning on her knife. She spoke in a voice strained but strong. "He saved me." The warriors didn't lower their weapons. One stepped forward, her spear steady. "Silence, Ryan, the matriarch will decide." The mist parted once more. An elder emerged, her skin pale celadon, her face a map of scars and wrinkles. She leaned on a staff carved from petrified wood, inlaid with the same strange metallic threads. Her eyes were clouded with age, yet they seemed to pierce straight through Cale. Her gaze stopped at his chest, at the torn jumpsuit, the faded corporate Starburst logo. Her lips moved, voice like grinding stones. "The sigil," she whispered. "The prophecy is fulfilled." The warriors murmured, shock rippling through their ranks. The elder raised her staff, her expression grave and hungry all at once. "We have waited 200 years. Now the hunt begins." Cale didn't understand. Hunt, his grip tightened on the pistol. What hunt? The elder's mouth stretched into a smile that revealed teeth filed to points. "Run, human, run for your life." The crimson peak rose out of the jungle like a blood-red wound against the sky. A towering cliff of scarlet stone, honeycombed with caves and carved dwellings, its surface glowed faintly in the filtered light. Smoke curled from pits and braziers, carrying the scent of burning herbs and something harsher, metallic. Cale was dragged through it all, bound by living vines that tightened when he resisted. His pistol was gone, his scanner confiscated. Everywhere, alien faces turned to stare, some with awe, others with hatred. Whispers followed him like shadows. The prey, the prophecy, the sigil. Finally, he was hauled into a vast chamber carved into the mountain's heart. Crystals in the ceiling glowed blue-green, casting eerie light over the gathered clan. At the far end sat the elder matriarch, staff in hand. Beside her stood Ryan, her wounded leg bandaged, her amber eyes locked coldly on Cale. He forced himself to speak, his voice level despite the tightness in his chest. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm a geologist, not prey. I can help you. My pod had water purifiers, medical supplies, comms." "Silence," the matriarch's voice cracked like stone splitting. "You are the prey. She," her staff pointed at Ryan, "is the hunter. That is the law. At dawn, the hunt begins." Gasps rose around the chamber. Cale's jaw clenched. He scanned the warriors, the spears, the exits. He had been in tight spots before, but never like this. Ryan's voice rang clear, filled with pride and cruelty both. "The first kill is mine." The vines tightened around Cale's wrists. He bit back a grimace, staring at the woman who had nearly died in his arms. Her amber eyes held no gratitude now, only the promise of the hunt. And in that moment, Cale understood this wasn't survival. This was ritual. This was tradition older than his own company, older than his own people's records of this world. He was no man here. He was prey. But if they thought he would die easy, they were wrong. He was human, and humans didn't just run. They adapted. They endured. They fought. Dawn on Zios was not bright. It was a deeper shade of yellow inside the fog, like a bruise spreading across the sky. The jungle steamed. The red cliff of Crimson Peak sweated resin and smoke. Drums thudded from somewhere high above, slow and heavy, like a second heartbeat inside the mountain. They cut Cale's bonds at the lip of a narrow canyon. Ryan stood across from him with two elders, her injured leg wrapped tight with dark cloth. She leaned on a spear as if it were part of her body. Her face was calm, but her amber eyes watched him the way a hawk watches a mouse in the grass. The elder with the staff raised it. "The prey will be given 2 hours," she said, voice rolling down the stone like thunder. "You will carry no weapons. You may use the mountain. If you live past sunset, you will be hunted again at dawn. If you die, your blood will feed the roots." The other elder took a bone blade and sliced a notch in Cale's forearm. The cut was shallow, but the sting was sharp, and a single drop of blood sizzled when it hit the stone. The women hummed in answer as if that sound were a prayer. Ryan stepped closer, close enough that the metal threads in her braids caught the weak light. "Run well," she said. "I will not take a kill that is clumsy." Cale met her eyes. "Then you may be disappointed." She didn't smile. The elder's staff slammed down. "Run." Cale ran. The canyon was a long wound in the earth. Walls of red stone rose on both sides, striped with bands of darker rock. The floor tilted and twisted, broken by boulders and slick shelves stained green by a thin skin of acid-loving moss. The air tasted like metal. Invisible insects clicked from cracks in the rock. Cale didn't sprint. He paced himself, long, steady strides. He counted his breaths. He counted the turns. He let the rock talk to him. The first thing he did was vanish his trail. He slid down a scree slope to a shallow stream that hissed softly as it flowed. The water was not water as he knew it. It was a sour, corrosive trickle that ate at stone by degrees. He stepped into it carefully, choosing places where roots crossed the flow so his boots wouldn't dissolve. He moved upstream for nearly a kilometer, shoulder brushing the canyon wall, head low, careful not to splash. Where the stream bent, he climbed. He used a leaning trunk, petrified wood as smooth as glass, to haul himself onto a ledge. He rolled his weight across his hips, not his feet, and boot placed on hard protrusions to avoid prints. He dug a heel into a crack, lifted, and wedged onto a higher shelf. He reached a flat shelf beneath an overhang and lay still, breathing through his mask, listening. The canyon breathed too. You could hear it if you were patient. Wind slid over gashes in the wall and turned to sound. Tiny stones ticked down nearby slopes. Somewhere far away, an animal barked, a short, ugly noise followed by wet, happy tearing. Cale closed his eyes and mapped what he'd seen. The canyon bent like a crooked finger, 3 narrow passes, 2 chutes full of loose rock, 1 steep ramp leading to a bowl where any sound would echo in circles. He stood and started to work. He found a narrow neck between 2 house-sized boulders that formed a natural gate. Above it, a slab hung heavy as if thinking about falling. He tested it, a palm pressed to the fissure, an ear to the stone. The slab answered with a tiny groan. "Good," he whispered. He set a lever, a wedge of petrified wood. A fulcrum made from a fractured rib of bone he found tangled in vines. He pulled at fallen creepers, thick, fibrous, wet, and braided them tighter into a rope thick as his thumb. He looped it around a spur, fed it through a crack, and tied a simple trigger near knee-height where a runner would not see it in time. The idea was simple. The first warrior would pass, and the cord would tug free the wedge, and gravity would remember its job. He left the gate and climbed to a flat stone overlooking a different choke point. Here, the canyon floor narrowed to a path no wider than a man's shoulders. The right wall was smooth and impossible to grip. The left wall wore a beard of brittle crystal. He tried a few with his fingertips. They chimed softly. When he tapped 3 in a row, low, high, low, the canyon threw the sound back at him, doubled and delayed. He filed that away. A decoy line of echoes could draw ears and eyes to the wrong turn. On deserts and ice moons, sounds carry lies. Rock is no different if you know how to ask it to help. He moved on. He found a stand of tall, pale ferns whose fronds drooped like pitted sails. Razor edges. Drops of acid beaded on their tips. Good to avoid, better to use. He snapped 2 fronds at the base, wiped their edges carefully across a smooth rock, and left that rock where a running foot might slip on the bright, invisible smear. He did not think of it as a trap to kill. He thought of it as a suggestion to fall hard. After an hour, he had 3 tricks set in 3 places. He ate a strip of field ration from his suit, sour and tough and perfect. He drank nothing. The stream would chew his mouth and gut. He would have to find caves where fungi collected water or find the gray thorn fruit that sweats neutral sap. He'd seen one near the first turn. He marked it in his head. He took a long breath and looked back the way he'd come. The hunt would be on him soon. The first sign of pursuit was the birds. They were not birds in the way he knew birds. They were 6-winged gliders with teeth, all frill and bone and translucent skin. They made a high chorus when undisturbed. Then all at once, that chorus broke like a snapped string. It cut off and then resumed broken, shifted. Something large had moved beneath them. The second sign was the smell. Herbs and smoke, faint under the acid, drifting, then gone. The third sign was sudden silence. Cale stepped behind a pillar of stone and went still. Stillness was a tool. He let his mind flatten. He counted to 60. He listened. A pebble clicked, then another, not a cascade, feet. He waited until the last possible second. Then he flicked a small shard of crystal into the narrow path, 3 meters beyond the razor fern smear. The shard chimed when it hit, bright as a coin dropped on glass. Heads turned toward the sound. He felt it rather than saw it. A warrior ran into the smear. She skidded, arms pinwheeling. She fell. A second warrior grabbed for her and caught only air. Both went down in an urgent, shuffling tangle. Spears clattered. Cale didn't run. He walked away fast. Behind him, a voice snapped, sharp, authoritative, angry in a way that sounded like restraint. Ryan. He didn't look back, but the sound of her voice, he knew it already threaded into his spine. He reached the stone gate and slipped over the top, hugging the angle where he could not be seen from below. He found his braided cord and pulled it up to slack the trip line. He did not want a woman crushed. He wanted time. But even as he moved, the tiny hairs on his neck stood up. A feeling, a presence. He glanced across the canyon. On the far wall, a figure stood half in shadow, higher than him, watching over the hunt. Not moving, not running. Photographs do not move. Statues do not move. But this figure, something about its stillness felt too exact. No, not a person. A totem. A watcher carved out of black metal and bone, its head turned toward his path. A shrine, a marker, he could not tell. It stared and he felt measured. He looked away. Cale dropped from the gate and slid into a deeper section of canyon. The rock here was different, darker, denser, with a faint glitter. He tapped it with his knuckles. The sound was dull, good ceiling, bad echo. The floor tilted into a bowl where voices would roll around and lie about their directions. He stopped long enough to smear mud over the bright starburst logo on his chest. The matriarch's gaze had stuck there. He wanted that sign gone. When he stood, Ryan's shadow fell across the far lip of the bowl. He saw her before she saw him. She moved like water. The limp was gone or hidden. Her spear was light in her hand. Her eyes scanned the dust and the cracks and the roots for a story. He had left her very little story to read, but even that little she read. For a second, they stared at one another across 30 meters of hot air and yellow mist. He raised a hand slowly, palm out, a gesture so old it belonged to any world. Her eyes narrowed. She did not lower her spear. Then other shadows flowed in behind her, 3 warriors younger, and she flicked her fingers once. They split in silence, fanning out to flank him. Kale turned and disappeared into a slit in the rock no wider than his chest. He scraped through, exhaled to fit, tore his jumpsuit along the spine. On the other side, the slit opened into a tight corridor that turned twice and poured him out above a ledge. Below, the canyon widened into a pale field of flat stone crisscrossed by shallow cracks filled with leaching fluid. The fluid flashed like mirrors. It would be hard to cross without showing his route. He didn't cross, he looked up. Above him, the wall of the canyon lifted and split into a ragged shelf dotted with pale, blistered growths, fungi that glowed faintly even in day. Where fungi grew, sometimes water hid. He hauled himself up, fingers screaming, body protesting, and tucked into a damp pocket between 2 bulges. There he found what he needed, a blue-green cup of fungus that collected condensation and sweat from the stone. He tipped it gently and took one careful sip. It tasted like mold and metal, but it didn't burn. He took 2 more slow. He heard the hunters pass below. One of them laughed, short and confident. Footsteps fanned across the mirror field. The backs of his hands prickled. Then the laugh cut off. A hiss, the sound of a foot stepping where it should not, and the soft complaint of a hidden crack giving way. A cry, a body dropping. "Leave her," a voice said, cold, hard, not Ryan's. "The prey runs. He is the mountain's offering. We cannot lose him." "Lift," Ryan said, and her voice brooked no argument. "We do not feed the mountain with our own." There was silence, then the grunt and scuffle of 3 bodies rescuing a 4th. After that, the canyon was quiet except for the breathing of rock. Kale slid deeper into the fungal pocket and shut his eyes. He allowed himself 30 seconds to be human, heart fast, hands shaking, the smell of his own fear sharp as vinegar in his mask. Then he opened his eyes and listened. Something new had entered the canyon's voice. At first, it was only a note under the rest. Then it grew into a thin, unmistakable whine, not wind, not water, the steady climb of a powered machine spinning up. It prickled the skin the way high voltage prickles nerves from a distance. It was a sound smarter than this place, wrong in the way polymer is wrong in a forest. Kale eased out of his pocket and climbed, silent now, drawn by that sound as surely as a needle is drawn to north. He reached a cut in the canyon wall that opened to a broader basin. He belly-crawled to the lip and peered down. What he saw drew a cold line along his spine. On the basin floor, a team of figures in matte armor moved around a machine the size of a small house. The machine wore a crown of augers and spines and cables. Its center glowed a dull, unhealthy red, a seismic drill. Even in the yellow fog, the gleam of its fresh metal was too bright to be anything but new. The armored figures were not clan, they were human. Their suits bore the stylized starburst, his starburst clean and clear. A few helmets were off, the faces beneath were hard and bored and professional. The kind of men and women you sent to do work you didn't write down. He knew the drill's teeth. He'd signed approvals for one like it 3 worlds ago. He knew the readings on the big standing display next to it, even from this distance. Pressure spikes, temperature gradient, gas composition. The numbers were ugly. Everything down below was primed and brittle. They were drilling into a reservoir they did not understand. Or worse, they understood exactly and did it anyway. Kale's mouth went dry. The jungle's poison fog, the dying plants, the acidic water, the broken weather. This wasn't only a broken planet. This was exploitation. An illegal operation using Black Ops muscle to rip something hot and profitable out of a fragile core. "All this time," he whispered, "it wasn't angry spirits, it's us." A whisper of grit slid along the ledge behind him. Kale turned, pistol hand empty out of habit, and found a spear tip at his throat. Ryan's. She had followed him alone. The others were not in sight, or she had left them behind to take this honor herself. Her eyes flicked from his face to the basin below. She did not move the spear. "End of the hunt, offworlder," she said softly. "You have run well, but the law—" "Look," Kale said. He didn't plead. He didn't explain. He only tilted his head toward the machine grinding into her world's bones. Ryan's gaze shifted. Her body went as still as a coiled spring. Her pupils tightened. Her grip on the spear loosened, then tightened again. "More like you," she said. "Not a question, a diagnosis." "Not like me," Kale said. "Corporate black ops. They're here to take something they can sell. If they crack the wrong pocket, your mountain goes hollow, the fog hot, the water dead, everything." He shook his head. "Everything you love will burn from the inside." "And you brought them," she said. He let that hit him. He didn't flinch away from the truth she could see. His logo, his training, his life that had served machines like this. "I crashed," he said. "They're not here for me. They're here for profit. They don't care about your hunt or your law. They don't care about you." Ryan stared down at the drill. Below, two armored figures hauled a heavy cylinder off a sled and locked it into a receiver. The machine's whine climbed a step. Blue-white arcs crawled along its crown like lightning trapped in glass. She breathed out once, long and thin. "Then I will kill them." "You try, they'll cut you down before you take 3 steps, Kale said. "We need to outthink them, we need to." The machine's crown tilted, re-aiming a subsonic hammer. A helmeted head turned their way. Kale's skin crawled. A sensor sweep had licked over their ledge and found a shape where no shape should be. The mercenary raised a hand. Others looked up. One brought a weapon to his shoulder, a long barrel with a heavy power pack and a cooling jacket that steamed in the yellow air. Kale grabbed Ryan's arm and shoved. The ledge exploded under the first shot. Stone shards scythed the air. The shock lifted Kale and slammed him down on his side. The world rang like a bell. Ryan rolled, coming up on a knee, spear leveled, eyes blazing. The weapon below spat again. A bolt of blue-white tore a fist-sized gouge where Ryan had been a heartbeat earlier. Heat washed across Kale's face. The smell of vaporized rock hit the back of his throat and stuck there, wet and sour. "Move," Kale shouted, voice raw. He pointed along the lip toward a crack in the wall where shadow pooled. "There, cover." Ryan hesitated for one treacherous blink, a hunter's pride outraged at being pushed. Then the next shot screamed past, and she moved. They ran low along the ledge as a third bolt punched the wall above their heads and showered them with grit and pain. Below, the machine's whine rose higher still, eager as a thing alive. The shooters adjusted, tracking. Kale's boot hit loose rock. He slid, caught himself with his fingertips on the ledge's outer edge, and hung for a single endless instant over the bright throat of the basin. Ryan's hand clamped around his forearm with impossible strength and yanked him back a breath before the fourth shot chewed the air where his chest had been. He looked into her eyes. She looked into his. "Not my division," he said, panting, "but my mess." Her jaw flexed. "Your mess, my mountain." The fifth shot came, and the ledge beneath them cracked with a sound like a giant bone breaking. The stone fell away. They fell with it. They fell. The ledge cracked like brittle glass, breaking free in a thunderous cascade. Stone screamed against stone as the shelf tore loose and plunged into the basin. Kale Lockhart hit first, the impact jarring every bone, the shockwave rattling his teeth. Pain flared from his ribs where rock pressed down. For a second, he couldn't breathe. The world was all dust, heat, and the shriek of metal drilling deeper. Ryan landed beside him, rolling to bleed off the force. She rose fluidly, spear in hand, her body alive with tension. Her amber eyes cut through the cloud. She pulled Kale to his feet before he could recover his breath. "On your legs, pray," she snapped, "or you'll die crawling." He staggered upright, coughing, vision swimming. Shapes moved in the basin below, 3 mercenaries armored and quick, weapons already trained. They had seen the fall. Now they advanced, boots sinking slightly into the scorched soil. Their rifles glowed, plasma coils hissing with heat. Kale's instinct was survival. Find cover, plan, endure. But the mercenaries had angles covered, and the seismic drill behind them roared like an iron beast, vibrations shaking the ground in his soles. Running here meant being cut down before 10 steps. "We can't fight them head-on," Kale hissed. Ryan bared her teeth. "Then we fight wrong." And she moved. She was faster than human eyes could follow, darting forward low and sudden, a spear thrust aimed at the weak joint of a mercenary's armor. The man cursed, stumbling back. His shot went wide, sizzling past Cale's head. Ryan spun, ripping the spear free, her braid flashing like black fire. She was already moving for the next one, her body all instinct and wrath. Cale dove sideways as a bolt seared into the stone where he'd stood. His shoulder hit hard and he rolled behind a boulder. He forced his lungs to calm. He had nothing, no weapon, no armor, no plan. But the mercenaries weren't gods. They were people with orders, with routines, with blind spots. He pressed his hand to the rock beneath him. It vibrated, faint but steady, alive with the drill's rhythm. And in that rhythm he heard a weakness, a pocket, a hollow. Cale's eyes narrowed. "All right," he muttered, "let's change the ground." Ryan danced with death. The second mercenary pressed forward, rifle snapping bright bursts that hissed past her. She twisted around them, spear scraping across his chest plate. Sparks flew. The third mercenary flanked, weapon raised. She pivoted, dragging the first mercenary into the line of fire. The plasma bolt hit him square in the back, burning a hole through armor and flesh. He collapsed with a mechanical groan. The survivor shouted, fury in his voice, "Kill the alien." Ryan snarled and lunged, her blade point striking his thigh joint. He stumbled but didn't fall. His armored hand backhanded her across the face, the force of it throwing her into the dust. Her spear clattered away. Cale's gut twisted. He didn't think, he ran. He dove for the mercenary's dropped equipment bag, fingers scrabbling for anything usable. His hand closed around a cylindrical charge pack, an energy cell for the drill, heavy and volatile. Training whispered danger. Instinct screamed opportunity. He tore it free and slammed it against the stone near the mercenary's boots. The vibration shifted. The drill's hum grew strained. Cale slammed the pack harder, finding the seam in the rock. With a pop, the stone cracked. A hiss rose, high-pitched, unsteady, gas venting. A pocket had opened. The mercenary froze, eyes wide behind his visor. "What the?" Cale kicked the pack into the fissure, stepped back. The explosion was small, but it didn't need to be large. The ground buckled, belching yellow vapor. The mercenary stumbled, thrown onto his back. His rifle fired wild into the fog. The pocket screamed as it collapsed inward, rocks tumbling like dice. Ryan was on him before he could rise. She wrenched the rifle away and slammed the butt into his helmet once, twice, until the visor cracked and the man went still. Silence hit the basin like a hammer. The drill still roared, alive and hungry, but the mercenaries were down. Cale bent over, sucking filtered breaths, chest burning. His side throbbed. His arms shook from adrenaline. Ryan wiped blood from her mouth and retrieved her spear, her chest heaving. Her eyes found him. They burned with suspicion, but not the same as before. "You fight," she said, voice rough. "Not well, but you fight." "I think that was a compliment," Cale muttered, dropping to sit on the warm stone. It was not. They sat in the dust, two survivors bound by nothing but necessity. For a long moment the drill's howl filled the air, pressing down on them both. The red cliff loomed above, its face trembling faintly. The mountain was alive, and it was angry. Cale's scanner still hung from his wrist, cracked but functional. He tapped it, coaxing the display back to life. Readouts flickered across the glass. Pressure spikes, toxic gas, instability. His stomach knotted. "They're not just mining," he said quietly. "They're ripping open the planet. If they breach the wrong vein, this whole range could collapse. Your home, your people, it'll all go." Ryan's knuckles whitened around her spear. "Then we stop them." Cale looked at her. For the first time, her eyes didn't see prey. They saw something else. Maybe an equal, maybe an enemy of her enemies. He didn't know. But before he could answer, a new sound cut the air. Boots, dozens of them, marching in unison. From the canyon mouth came more mercenaries, armored, weapons gleaming, faces hidden. At their head walked a man with scars cut deep into his jaw, eyes cold as glass. He carried no rifle, only a resonator cylinder, its tip glowing faintly blue. Cale's blood froze. "Merrick," he whispered. The man looked up and smiled, cruel and thin. "Lockhart, they told us you were dead. Guess we'll just have to fix that." He raised the resonator and flicked it on. The mountain groaned, a sound deeper than thunder. The stone beneath them trembled like a living thing. Dust cascaded from the cliffs. Birds screamed from the fog, fleeing in panicked swarms. Cale knew the device. He'd seen it once before in a different canyon on a different world. He knew exactly what it did. "Merrick," he shouted, "you'll bring it down on all of us." "That's the point," Merrick called back. No witnesses, no problems. Ryan's spear lifted, her lips curled back in a snarl. The resonance grew louder, the canyon walls vibrating like drumskins. Kale turned to her, heart pounding. He's not trying to kill us. Her amber eyes flashed. Then what? Kale's voice dropped to a whisper, full of dread. He's trying to bury us alive. The resonator's scream became a living thing. Stone shuddered. The cliff face split with a cracking roar that ran through the canyon like a wave. Ryan grabbed Kale's arm and pulled. They sprinted, half-blind inside a storm of dust and yellow fog, while a wall of rock peeled away above them. Here, Kale shouted, spotting a dark seam in the cliff, thin as a knife cut. They dove for it as the ledge where they'd stood a heartbeat ago tore free and dropped like a guillotine. The seam became a fissure, the fissure a throat. Ryan shoved Kale ahead of her, then twisted sideways and slid after him. Behind them, the world fell. Rock slammed shut over the opening, sealing them in with a final, thunderous cough. The outside sound cut off at once. The mountain swallowed it. What remained was ringing silence broken only by their harsh breaths and the soft patter of settling grit. Darkness pressed like weight. Then slowly, a dim blue-green glow pushed back the black. Patches of wet fungus clung to the walls, fuzzed and trembling from the shock, shining like drowned stars. The light turned Ryan's jade skin into ghost stone. Kale tasted dust and hot metal inside his mask. He coughed once and winced. Pain bit his shoulder and ribs where the fall had slammed him against the fissure. Ryan crouched, listening with a hunter's stillness. The mountain groaned, long, low, angry. A shower of fine stones ticked down like rain. Then at last it was quiet. "We are sealed," she said, no fear in her voice, only fact. Kale lay still for 5 breaths, forcing his mind to step back from panic. The scanner on his wrist flickered when he hit the power stud. It read the air, thin, sour, but breathable through the mask for now. He rolled to sit. His shoulder flared white-hot, sending cold sweat down his spine. He looked and saw why. A jagged rock had sliced his upper arm open. The cut was ugly, burned around the edges from a near glance by that plasma bolt. He pressed the heel of his hand against it. His glove hissed where his blood touched the stone. Ryan was already moving. She ran her palm across a wall, felt along a bulge of fungus, and broke off a handful. The growth shone brighter when bruised. She knelt beside him and crushed the mass between her fingers until it bled a slick, glowing paste. "This will numb and clean," she said. "It eats rot." "It looks like it will eat me," Kale muttered. "It will if used wrong." She met his eyes. "Hold still." He did. The paste stung like a wasp at first, biting deep, then turned cold as river ice. Heat drained out of the wound. His breath steadied. The pain slid down from a shout to a murmur and then to a manageable ache. He blinked, surprised. "That's good medicine." "It is hungry medicine." She scooped the residue into her palm, held it to her chest, and breathed through a low chant. The fungus dimmed, as if it had taken something from her and become satisfied. When she stood, her steps were a little slower than before. "You gave it something," Kale said, frowning. "What did you do?" "The cave takes from the healer, then gives to the hurt," Ryan said simply. "My grandmother taught me the harvest song. The glow eats life when it is fresh. It returns part of it in healing if guided. If not guided, it only feeds." Kale stared at the damp blue smear on his arm and then at Ryan's face, the sheen of sweat, the fine tremor at the corner of her mouth. "You should have used less." "You should have bled less," she said, and somehow a dry smile cracked the hard line of her jaw. It faded fast. She angled her head, listening. "Air moves up there." She pointed into the dark where the fissure widened and curled. "The mountain has other throats. We follow." They moved. The cavern sloped and twisted, sometimes so narrow that Kale had to exhale to slip through, sometimes opening into bowls where pale pillars rose from floor to ceiling like rib bones. The fungus spread like a soft map across the rock. In places, it dripped and pooled into cups that caught slow condensation. Ryan paused at one, dipped a finger, tasted, nodded, and handed the cup to Kale. The water was clean and bitter. He took 2 small swallows and stopped. Every habit from survival training said ration, always ration. Every cell in him screamed drink until empty. They passed a wall etched with lines, some natural, some clearly carved. Ryan's palm brushed them. "Hunters mark paths older than my mother's mother." Her fingers slowed over a symbol of a mountain with a slash through it. Her mouth tightened. "This says not safe." We moved faster. They climbed. The air tasted a little sweeter as they gained height, but it was still thin. Kale's head throbbed. His shoulder eased under the fungus poultice, but his ribs complained with every bend. Twice he had to stop and lean into the rock until the spinning passed. The third time he stopped, Ryan stopped with him. They stood in a narrow room where the ceiling dipped low. In the glow, she looked carved out of the mountain itself. For the first time since they met, neither had a weapon in hand. "You asked me why I saved you earlier," Kale said. His voice was rough, scraped raw by dust. "When the merc shot at you, I shoved you aside. I didn't think, I just moved." Ryan's eyes held his. "I asked no such thing." "You didn't have to." He eyed her, then gave a tired half-laugh. "Maybe I'm tired of rules that make good people die." Her mouth pressed thinner. "You do not know my rules." "No," he said. "I don't, but I know this. Outside that cave, your law said I should run and you should kill me. Inside this cave, your hands kept me from bleeding out. Maybe both are true, maybe both are wrong." She looked away. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy with things neither had words for yet. "Your people believe the hunt keeps this world alive," Kale said. "What if the hunt hides the real reason it is dying?" Ryan's head snapped back toward him, anger flaring. "You speak like the matriarch, all riddles and stones. Speak plain, offworlder." "Plain," Kale raised his bandaged arm and tapped the faded starburst on his chest, half hidden now under mud and grit. "This mark, your elder saw it and called it a sign from your prophecy. You call me prey because a man wearing this mark crashed here 2 centuries ago, and your legends say you hunted him." He gestured at the glow-wet walls. "What if that man wasn't prey? What if he was someone who could have helped? What if the prophecy was the story you told yourselves after you killed, the only help you had?" Her face went still, anger turning first to bristling pride, then to something harder, then to something close to fear. "You speak blasphemy." "I speak pattern," he said, softer now. "I've seen it on other worlds, a crash. Pieces of metal become charms. A radio becomes a voice of spirits. An engine becomes a god's heart. A story grows, and what really happened gets buried." She held his gaze so long his eyes watered. "And your proof?" Kale looked down at the small pendant that had sat against her throat since the clearing. He had dismissed it as adornment. Now in the blue glow, he saw the metal cap at its end. Not bone, not stone. Machine-made, pitted with age, but with edges too exact to be natural. "May I see that?" he asked. Ryan's hand rose to the pendant, instinctively protective. She hesitated, then pulled the thong over her head and placed the knife in his palm. It was a ritual blade, beautifully made. Curved, balanced, the leather-wrapped handle worn smooth by generations of hands. The cap at the pommel was dull metal mottled green-black from time in a harsh world. Kale turned it under the glow. He scraped a tiny patch with a fingernail. Beneath the corrosion, a faint symbol looked back at him, a starburst, not carved, stamped. His breath left him in a long, steady stream. "This is a piece from an escape pod," he said. "My company used this alloy and stamp on a series that flew 200 years ago. Serial designators sit right here." He traced a line so faint a human might miss it in bright daylight. He didn't miss it. He had hunted these markings his whole life, in caves and outcrops and airless pits. "Your first prey wore this." He was a pilot. Ryan's fingers closed around air where the pendant had been, then curled into a fist. Her composure cracked. Her chest rose and fell fast. The blue glow painted tears like silver on her cheeks before she could stop them. "My mother told me the tale," she said, voice paper-thin. "A starman fell. The matriarch of that time declared him sacred, and the hunt began. When his body was laid at the peak, the mountain's sickness slowed for a season. We believed the law was right because it worked for a moment." She shook her head hard as if to dislodge the thought. "If he was not prey, what did we do?" Kale closed the knife in her hand, folding her fingers around the old metal. "You did what frightened people do when the world breaks and no one explains why. You made sense out of pain the only way you knew. My people have done the same. We build rules and call them truth. We build machines and call it destiny. Sometimes we're wrong and it kills us slowly." Ryan's knuckles whitened around the knife. Her shoulders bowed just a little, not defeat, grief. "How do I tell them?" she whispered. "How do I tell my sisters the thing we're proudest of is the wound we never stopped licking?" "You don't," Kale said gently. "Not now. First we live, then we change minds." She looked at him a long time. Something in her face shifted. The hunter did not vanish, but the part of her that had only seen prey blinked and woke. She nodded once. "First we live," she echoed. They moved again. The passage climbed, then narrowed, then opened into a chamber the size of a shuttle bay. The ceiling hung high and split by jagged veins of quartz. The glow pooled in wide fans along the floor, brighter here, fed by damp. Kale's scanner crackled and spat numbers that stacked uneasily in his mind. Methane concentrations, pressure differentials, gas flows that whispered of pockets ready to burst. He circled slowly, reading the rock with his fingers and his feet. He crouched and tapped with a loose plate of stone, counting the delay between tap and echo. He knelt and pressed his ear to cracks and listened for the hollow sigh behind them. Ryan waited without speaking, eyes on the entrances, spear across her knees, a sentinel in blue light. "Talk to me, Mountain," Kale murmured. "Tell me where you breathe." When he stood again, a plan sat on his tongue. It tasted like risk and hope in equal measure. "There's a pocket above us," he said. He pointed to a web of hairline fractures up in the ceiling. "It's big, close. There are 3 more farther out behind these walls." He pointed again. "If we can open a controlled hole in the thin spot, force the first pocket to vent up, the pressure wave might break a chimney to the surface." "Controlled," Ryan repeated, testing the word as if it were a new spear weight. "How?" Kale pulled at his suit at the shoulder and unsnapped a plate. Beneath it, the emergency thermal unit sat like a square coin against his ribs, a device meant to keep a human alive in cold void for precious minutes when everything else failed. "This will overheat if I ask it to," he said. "It's designed to throw heat as a distress beacon into space. If I rewire it and pack it with fungus paste and crystal fragments, it will focus a burst hot enough to light gas." "Light the spirits," Ryan said, eyes narrowing. "You would wake them." "I would give them a door," Kale said. "More gas will follow, everything goes up through the new door. If we choose the thinnest point, maybe the mountain opens instead of collapses." "And if you choose wrong?" Her voice was very quiet. "Then we punch a hole in the worst place and the whole roof comes down, or the pockets chain and blow this chamber into a kiln." He held her gaze. "We could die in fire instead of stone." Ryan considered that without flinching. "We may die slowly if we do nothing. The air, the wounds, the thirst." She looked at the spiderweb of fractures, then at his hands. "Can you do it?" "I can try." She breathed out a slow assent. "Tell me where to stand, tell me what to carry, tell me when to run." They worked quickly. Kale gutted the thermal unit with careful fingers, teeth bared when a screw refused the first twist. He braided conductive thread from his suit's emergency kit with hair-thin copper he stripped out of his wrist scanner's useless antenna. He rubbed the brightest, driest fungus into a paste and mixed it with powdered crystal he scraped from the cave wall. Ryan gathered shards, sorted them by pitch when tapped, and handed him the ones that sang together. She moved as he asked without question. He explained what he could in simple words. "It's a fuse," he said, showing her the strip of rag he had soaked. "You light this end, it burns down. When it meets the paste, it will flash. That flash will wake the gas above us. The burst goes up, not out, or that is the hope." "Hope is a thin bridge," she said, but there was a glint that had not been there before. They lashed the device to a thin stalactite beneath the hairline cracks. Kale set the fuse and checked every knot twice. His hands shook only a little. When he finished, he and Ryan stepped back to the shelter of a natural alcove, the only recess that might shield them from the first rush. He looked at her. "On 3, we light and run." She nodded, face calm, eyes bright as coins. "1," he said. A sound came then, metal on stone, faint but wrong. They froze, heads turning together. The sound came again, closer, the scrape of a boot, the clink of a rifle butt against rock. Voices drifted through a side passage in broken echoes. Human voices, filtered thin through helmets. "Signals close." "Thermal spike, somebody's reconfig." "Lockhart." Ryan's spear lowered as her body coiled. She looked from Kale to the fuse to the dark mouth where the voices grew clearer. She set her jaw. "They're coming," she said. Kale's mouth went dry. He put his thumb to the striker on the fuse and met her eyes. "If we light this now," he whispered, "we might blow the whole mountain." "If we don't," she whispered back, "they kill us and drill the heart." For a heartbeat, the cave held its breath with them. Kale struck the spark. The fuse caught. A thin orange thread hissed along the rag, spitting smoke that smelled like burning mold. The glow lit Kale's hands, his jaw tight as stone. He and Ryan turned together and sprinted for the alcove, boots hammering the cavern floor. Behind them, mercenary voices rose sharp. "Contact." The first plasma shot cracked past, slicing a glowing scar across the wall. Another bolt struck the floor near the fuse. It didn't snuff the fire, it fed it. The flame raced faster toward the paced charge. Down, Cale barked. He shoved Ryan into the alcove and threw himself after her. The cave erupted. The explosion punched the world inside out. Light blazed white-blue, searing retinas even through shut lids. Heat slammed them flat. The shockwave tore across the chamber and clawed up the walls. The thin ceiling fractures split with a howl like tearing sky. Then the gas above woke. A column of fire roared upward, ripping through stone like paper. The cavern's ceiling shattered. Debris rained, some chunks big as huts, others sharp as knives. Ryan covered Cale with her body, her braid lashing like a whip. He felt her strength lock around him as the storm raged. The blast didn't kill them. That meant Cale had guessed right. But the mountain was far from calm. When the roar faded, choking dust filled the chamber. Smoke and grit choked the air. The fungal glow was gone, burned to black crust. What light remained came from the ragged new wound in the ceiling. There, far above, a faint shaft of daylight pierced the haze, a cold, pale promise. Cale rolled onto his back, chest heaving. His ears rang, every bone screamed, but he was alive. Ryan rose, coughing, ash streaked across her jade skin. She turned her head slowly, eyes narrowing at the far side of the chamber. Cale followed her gaze. The mercenaries hadn't died in the blast. 3 had made it inside before the charge blew. Now, though battered, they advanced, armor cracked, visors scorched, but weapons steady. One of them was Merrick. He looked even more monstrous in the new light. His scarred face glistened with sweat under his shattered helmet. His resonator cylinder hung at his side, cracked but still glowing. His smile was sharp. "Well done, Lockhart," Merrick called, voice rough but mocking. "You just dug our exit for us." He leveled a rifle at Ryan. Cale forced himself up, every joint protesting. "Merrick, listen to me. You hit those methane pockets wrong, you'll trigger a chain reaction. This whole range will blow." "That's not my problem," Merrick said flatly. "Corporate wants ore, not excuses, and they don't need witnesses when the job's finished." Ryan's spear lifted, her stance coiled. "He lies like a man who fears truth." Merrick sneered. "She talks like a savage, doesn't matter. You'll both be dust when the mountain settles." The other 2 mercs spread wide, rifles humming. Ryan shifted to cover Cale, teeth bared. Cale's chest hammered. He had no pistol, no explosives left. Nothing but rock, instinct, and a battered scanner still sparking on his wrist. And then his mind caught something. The blast had opened a chimney. Gas still hissed from the fractures overhead. If Merrick fired heavy into the chamber, the heat could trigger another flare, one hot enough to finish everything. Cale raised his voice, buying seconds. "Merrick, this isn't a mine, it's a bomb waiting for a spark." "That's the plan," Merrick said. He flicked the resonator on. Its low hum made the stone beneath their boots tremble. Ryan's spear twitched. "He breaks the heart," she growled. Cale grabbed her wrist hard. "Wait!" His eyes locked with hers. "If he wants a spark, we give him more than he can handle." Understanding flickered there, distrust too, but in that moment she nodded. The mercenaries opened fire. Bolts of plasma carved molten grooves through stone. Shards rained. Ryan darted forward, faster than sight, spear arcing. She struck one merc in the knee joint, dropping him to a howl. His rifle discharged wild, chewing fire into the fractured ceiling. The gas above screamed awake. A flash ignited, smaller but fierce, forcing the mercenary down in a wave of searing air. Cale sprinted low, pain lancing his ribs. He dove for the dropped rifle, fingers wrapping around the grip. It was hot, alive with residual charge. He swung it up, aiming not at Merrick, but at the largest fissure overhead. "Lockhart, don't," Merrick barked. Cale pulled the trigger. The chamber became a furnace. Fire ripped upward through the chimney, widening it, tearing daylight into the cave like a blade. The concussion threw everyone down. The second merc was lifted off his feet and smashed against the wall, armor cracking like a shell. Ryan rolled, coughing blood, but her spear never left her hand. She sprang, closing the last distance to Merrick. He swung his resonator, the heavy device cracking across her shoulder. She grunted but drove her spear low, piercing through the weak seam of his armor just above the hip. Merrick roared, backhanding her to the ground. His weapon slipped from bloody hands. His eyes blazed as he staggered forward, towering over Cale. "You should have stayed dead in the crash," he spat. Cale leveled the rifle. His voice was iron. Humans don't stay dead easy. He fired. The bolt caught Merrick full in the chest. His body slammed back, cracked, and lay still, smoke rising from the armor. Silence. Broken stone dripped glowing veins. Firelight danced across soot. Ryan crawled upright, clutching her wounded arm, her breath ragged but steady. Her amber eyes found Kale's unreadable. "You kill like prey fighting cornered," she said softly. Kale dropped the rifle. His arms shook. His chest burned. He was barely on his feet, but he met her eyes. "I kill to live, to give us a chance to climb out of this tomb." Ryan tilted her head, blood streaking her jaw. Her lips pressed into something almost like respect. Almost. Then the mountain groaned again, deeper this time. The chimney cracked wider, raining debris. Daylight glared through dust, blinding and raw. Kale wiped grit from his visor and stared up. "That's our way out." Ryan followed his gaze. Her grip tightened on her spear. "The climb is death." "Maybe," Kale said, already limping toward the fractured wall. "But so is waiting down here. Your matriarch wanted a hunt." He glanced back at her, his gray eyes flaring with stubborn fire. "Now the mountain hunts all of us. We either climb or we die." Ryan's chest rose, fell. The pendant with the starburst glimmered faintly in the firelight. She looked at Merrick's corpse, then at Kale. Something shifted in her, something she'd never admit. She should kill him, end the hunt, claim her honor. Instead, she followed. Together, prey and hunter began to climb toward the light. The climb was a fight against heat and gravity. The chimney they had blown was narrow in places and knife-wide in others, a jagged throat lined with glassy melt and black ash. Hot breath pulsed from the wound at odd intervals as hidden gas pockets sighed and burned. Light from above was real now, a pale, cold blade stabbing down through dust, but it came in waves, shuttered by veils of smoke and drifting grit. "Count 4 heartbeats after each breath," Kale said, voice rough through the mask. "Then move." Ryan nodded once. She didn't argue. She hooked her spear into a crack, tested it, then hauled herself up light and fast. Kale followed, slower, ribs and shoulder complaining with every lift. The melted stone was treacherous, sharp where it wasn't slick. Twice he slipped, and twice Ryan's hand was there, iron around his wrist, catching him without a word. They found a pocket ledge halfway up, a shallow shelf barely wide enough for both. They pressed chest to stone while the mountain exhaled a rush of hot air past their faces that reeked of rotten eggs and burned metal. Ryan's breath was quick and tight. The blue paste she had spread on his arm earlier had faded to a dull stain. He could see the cost in her eyes now, a fine tremor in the muscles around them, a tightening at the corner of her mouth. She stared upward, pupils small in the sudden bright. "Drink," Kale said and tipped his canteen. 3 careful sips for him, 2 for her. It wasn't much, but it steadied the shakes. He caught her wrist when she moved to climb. "Wait, hear it." She listened. Even here, the canyon had a voice. Heat hummed. Stone ticked. Far below, a fragment of the roof finally gave up its grip and fell away with a noise like a drumbeat. "Now," he said, and they moved again. They climbed past gray columns that looked like frozen smoke. They climbed through a ragged web of fractures that glittered with tiny crystals, each one singing almost too soft to hear when her spear brushed them. Gas hissed once from a crack the width of a fingernail. Kale slapped his palm over it and felt the cold, wet whisper of methane trying to escape. "Don't touch that," he warned, as if she were the one who had reached for it. "If it vents under us and something sparks." Ryan didn't need the rest. "We cook," she said dryly. "You do not need to teach me what fire is." They were nearly to the top when the chimney narrowed to a mean slit, barely body-wide. Above it, daylight glared white, and the fog of Zios swirled like a pale sea. A final breath from the mountain blew down at them and died. Kale's lungs clawed for clean air that wasn't there. Ryan went first. She turned sideways, slid through the slit inch by inch, toes searching for purchase, the spear shoved ahead as a probe. She grunted once when the stone bit at her shoulder. Then she was through. She vanished into brightness. Kale followed. The rock scraped his ribs, tore his already shredded jumpsuit, and lit his shoulder wound on fire again. He gritted his teeth and pushed. For a heartbeat, he stuck fast, the world squeezing. Panic spiked up his spine. He forced his breath out, forced his mind flat, and gave one last twist. Hands closed around his forearms and dragged. Ryan's grip again. He burst into light and smoke and cold air and lay gasping on a skin of shattered red stone beneath a sky the color of old bruises. They had made it. He rolled onto an elbow and looked. Crimson Peak was broken. The blood-red cliff that had held the clan's world together now leaned like a cracked tooth. Stairways and platforms hung at wrong angles. Bridges sagged or dangled by a single vine. Smoke leaked from fissures, carrying the smell of burned herbs and hot resin. Parts of the cliff had already come down, the debris filled a jagged fan across the jungle below. People moved among the wreckage. Jade and emerald bodies ran with bundles. Children cried. Warriors shouted orders hoarse with dust. The mountain had always smelled like wood smoke and spice. Now it smelled like fear. The matriarch stood on a ridge of living rock that had not yet fallen. She looked even older in the raw light, her celadon skin gone to chalk, but the staff in her fist was steady. Warriors ringed her, 24 at least, bone armor strapped tight, crystal-tipped spears catching gray sun. When she saw Kale and Ryan crawl out of the chimney like ghosts, her eyes narrowed. Her lips pulled back from filed teeth. Ryan got to her feet, spear low, not as a threat but as a support. Kale pushed up after her, legs wooden, head pounding. He expected a cheer for survival. He got a horn. It was a low, flat note blown from a shell, ugly as an accusation. The ring of warriors tightened. Spears came up in one smooth motion, beautiful in its precision and cold in its intent. "The prey returns from the mountain," the matriarch said, her voice carried across the broken platforms. It was the same voice that had said run. It made the hair at the base of Kale's neck stand up. "The law is clear. The hunt ends with blood." Ryan stepped in front of him. Her stance said what words did not. "If you throw those spears, they hit me first." A murmur went through the ring. Shock, anger, betrayal. Kale felt the air shift as 24 grips tightened. "Daughter," the matriarch said, very soft, very deadly, "do not shame your line." Ryan's jaw worked. She lifted the pendant from her chest, the little ritual knife with the metal pommel, and held it high so the light found the faint, stamped starburst. "This mark," she said, voice thick but strong, "is not a spirit's eye. It is a machine's brand. The first prey was a pilot. We killed a voice that might have saved us, and then we called it holy so we could sleep." Her hand shook once, not with fear, with grief. "The offworlder you call prey saved me twice. He carved a door into stone and pulled me through it. He killed the iron men who tried to break the mountain." She lowered the knife and pressed it to her own chest. "If you must throw, throw through me." "You speak blasphemy," a warrior hissed. Others joined her. "No more words, law, blood, law." The matriarch raised her staff, and the ring stilled. Kale's heart kicked hard enough to hurt. He didn't have a speech. He had dust in his mouth, heat in his bones, and a scanner that still limped along his wrist. He lifted it and checked numbers out of habit. A new signal pulsed, not seismic, not gas. "Corporate." A clean, clipped ping on a frequency he knew too well. Merrick's suit, cracked and bloodied, had done its last job. It had called home. Kale swallowed. "Ryan," he said low, "we have another problem." She angled her head just enough to show she'd heard. "Worse than 20 spears. Worse than all the spears." Above the yellow fog, a shape cut the clouds, a dark wedge with a heat shimmer under its belly. It banked once, slow and sure, and lined up on the mountain like a hawk setting its shadow over a field. Its undercarriage opened, and a smooth cylinder slid into view, dull and cruel. Not a bomb, a scorcher. A low-atmo wash designed to sterilize sights, melt evidence, and turn living things into quiet ash. The clan saw it too. A ripple passed through the ring of warriors. Some flinched, others stared in defiance as if stubborn eyes could turn metal aside. Kale took 2 steps forward, out from behind Ryan. Spears lifted higher with the movement. He kept his hands open and high. "If you keep your law now, you all die," he said, loud, iron in his voice. "In 10 minutes, that ship washes this mountain with fire." "Lies," someone spat. "Tricks." Kale didn't argue. He lifted the scanner and boosted the suit's cracked speaker until it squealed. He tuned the band by muscle memory until a voice slid through the static in perfect, bored corporate diction. "Clean sweep authorization confirmed. Flight path nominal. Ignition in T-0009:30. All ground assets clear the perimeter." The words fell on stone like hail. The ring of warriors shifted again, disbelief cutting into fear, fear into rage. The matriarch's eyes never left Kale's face. "And what is your plan, pray? Run again? Where will you hide from sky fire?" Kale pointed downslope, toward the basin where the seismic drill still stood half-buried in smoke and dust. "We choke their throat. The Scorcher Pass is tied to telemetry from that rig. If we kill the rig's beacon, the pass aborts, or it misses and burns jungle instead of your home. Ryan understood fast. You want to run toward the iron mouth. Yes, Kale said, and we need every hand that can move. A warrior barked a bitter laugh. Follow a prey into the pit, never. Another younger glanced at the sky, then at Ryan and said nothing. The matriarch lowered her staff a finger width. It was not permission, it was weight. You ask us to break the law we are, she said, the words tasting of old stone and older pain. A law that carried us through 200 winters for a stranger's machine and a stranger's plan. It's not about me, Kale said softly. It's about your children who will burn if we don't act. Ryan turned so the ring could see her face. She had stopped shaking. Her voice was quiet, heavy. The hunt kept us alive while we were blind. We are not blind now. If we go by old law, we die by old law. If we stand, we die standing. If we run, we die running. Or, she lifted her spear not as a weapon, as a banner, we live if we choose to live. Silence. A child's cry rose thin and sharp from a broken bridge above. Somewhere a cooking pot fell and rang. The matriarch closed her eyes. In that small motion was 2 centuries of stories cracking. When she opened them, they were not softer, they were clearer. Take 10, she said. No more swiftest feet, strongest arms, the rest carry water and climb. If you return, the law will be words we carve again together. Her gaze cut to Kale. If you do not, the law ends with your ash. Ryan bowed her head once. Yes, mother. The word was not family, it was office, but it still meant something. The ring broke. In the space it left, 10 warriors stepped forward without hesitation, 2 with fresh scars, 1 barely past girlhood, 1 with gray in her braids and arms like carved wood. They checked straps, tied leather, tested crystal spearheads with quick taps that sang. Ryan grabbed a coil of living vine, as thick as a wrist and strong as wet cable. She looped it over her shoulder and tossed one end to Kale. Tie your chest, she said. If you fall, you do not fall alone. He did as he was told. The vine bit into his ribs, comforting in its bite. He took one last look at the matriarch. She did not nod. She did not smile. She simply stood, staff planted, as if holding up that broken piece of world with her own will. They ran. They ran down broken stairs that had been perfect yesterday. They ran across bridges that groaned and held. They slid on dust and blood and sap. The air grew hotter with every step toward the basin. The drill's scream reached them first, the jagged sound of a beast that did not know it was dying. Then the smell, chemical and wrong. Then the sight. The machine still stood, hunched and ugly, its crown bent, arcs crawling over cracked spines. A tangle of cables ran to a receiver tower that blinked clean corporate blue. The display next to it showed numbers that stopped Kale's heart. Temperature rising, pressure spiking, safety interlocks bypassed. A squat relay dish at the base pulsed. Ping, ping, ping telemetry sent skyward. Behind the rig, 3 mercenaries had survived the cave blasts and the avalanche. They were assembling something long and narrow on a tripod, an anti-personnel sweeper, the kind you use when you expect a crowd and don't care who bleeds. Down, Ryan snapped. Spearlight flashed. The first volley from the sweeper stitched molten lines across the stone where they had been. The clan hit the ground as one body and rolled into cover behind a spill of red boulders that steamed where acid rain had kissed them. Kale flattened, lungs burning. Above the fog, the scorcher's shadow slid closer, broad and patient. His cracked speaker hissed more numbers, T-000712. He tasted copper. We can't trade shots, he said. We'll lose, we need to cut the beacon now. Ryan glanced at him from the other side of the boulder, eyes like struck metal. Tell me what to break. He pointed with 2 fingers, quick and precise. That relay dish, base plate left side. The junction box just behind it, a rectangle with 3 latches. Inside is a bar the size of your finger with a red band. If it's broken, the machine forgets how to talk to the sky. And the iron men. Leave them to me. It was a bad joke. He had no rifle, he had nothing a soldier would respect. But he had rock and sound, and a scanner that could still lie to machines. He dragged the scanner to him and ripped the back plate off with his teeth. The copper thread he had stripped earlier dangled like a tail. He rerouted power from the thermal unit's remains, bridged a burnt trace with a sliver of Ryan's spear crystal, and shoved the assembly back together hard enough to make it mad. On my mark, he said, we make noise. He leaned around the boulder and pointed the scanner at the sweeper. He didn't have a smart countermeasure, but the rig did. He knew the drill's subsonics, its test tones, its language of buzzes and clicks. He picked the one that made bolts curl in their housings and bearings sing. He pushed that tone out at a pitch that set his teeth on edge. The sweeper stuttered. Its barrel jittered offline for a precious second as its servos tried and failed to compensate for a vibration that existed only in a cheap sensor's brain. Now, Ryan and the 10 exploded from cover as one. They didn't charge the gun. They went sideways, low, fast, into a mess of jagged scrap that had fallen from the machine's crown. The sweeper swung after them, ripping molten lines through old metal and boiling the air where a heartbeat earlier there had been flesh. One warrior, too slow, too proud, took the edge of the burst and spun into the dust with a scream that died in her throat. The others didn't stop. Ryan never broke stride. She dove under a cable the thickness of a thigh, rolled, came up inside the shadow of the relay tower and slammed her spear butt into the base plate where Kale had pointed. The metal dented. She hit it again. It buckled. The mercenaries shouted, adjusting, smart now, careful. Two stayed with the gun. One grabbed a pistol and sprinted for the relay. Kale needed 3 seconds. He got one. The gun found Ryan. The barrel whined as it bit into speed. The instant before it fired, Kale screamed, not words, just raw sound, and ran straight into the line of fire. He wasn't fast, he wasn't graceful, he was loud. He flung a fist-sized chunk of quartz as hard as he could at the sweeper's sensor cluster. The rock hit and shattered, a burst of purple-white light and a sound like a bell being murdered. The barrel twitched wrong for a half-breath. It was enough. Ryan tore the latches off the junction box with her bare hands. She ripped the panel open, found the red-banded bar by feel and snapped it. The relay dish died. Its blue blink went black. The scorcher above hiccuped in its steady descent. The calm corporate voice in Kale's speaker stuttered, confused. Telemetry lost, reacquisition in. The mercenary at the relay hit Ryan like a truck. They rolled together in the dust, his gauntlet closing on her throat. She shoved a knee into his ribs. He head-butted her mask, plastic cracked, air hissed. He went for the pistol at his hip. Kale arrived like a bad idea. He grabbed the man's wrist with both hands and bit down on a knuckle through the glove until his teeth squealed. The mercenary howled. Ryan tore free and put her knife up under his jaw and into the soft place her people knew even on armor. The body went slack. The sweeper found them again. The barrel swung. The servo wind sharpened. Ryan looked up, eyes calm, and pulled Kale into her, trying to cover him with a body already scraped and burned and bleeding. The gun fired. And died. The anti-personnel sweeper choked mid-burst and went silent. Smoke dribbled from a grill. The sensor cluster glowed cherry red, then black. One of the clan's older warriors, gray in her braids, arms like carved wood, stood up from behind a boulder with a length of living vine in both fists and a smile like a knife. The vine was looped around a fallen machine spine. She had hauled it into the sweeper's intake while it spun. The engine had eaten its own noose. "Grandmother sends her regards," she said and spat. For one thin breath, the field went quiet. Then the drill screamed a new note, higher, brighter, and so wrong Kale's knees wanted to fold. The crown of the machine flared. Arcs danced barefoot across the spines. The receiver tower, now dumb, tried to talk anyway, and the talking turned inward. Heat climbed. Pressure climbed. The rig's stupid heart beat faster and faster toward a seizure. Kale's speaker hissed, barely a whisper now. "Clean sweep, reacquire, T-000328. He looked at Ryan, she looked at him. "We broke its voice," she said. "We have to kill its heart," he said. "How?" He stared at the crown, at the glow, at the bent spines and the sparking cables and the wrongness of it all. He could almost see the path in his head. The load, the stress, the one bolt you kick to make a bridge fall. He saw it and hated it and loved it because it meant a chance. "We climb it," he said. "We tear the crown off by hand." Ryan lifted her spear. 10 warriors shifted on their feet. Above, the scorcher's shadow bloomed darker. The matriarch's mountain groaned. Somewhere behind them, children cried. "Then climb," Ryan said. They ran for the machine. The scorcher's belly opened wider. Flame licked the edges. Kale's speaker crackled one last number as they reached the first rung and hauled themselves up into heat and noise. T-000100. The rig screamed like a beast in its death throes. Heat poured from its crown in shimmering waves, making the air blur and the stones sweat. Cables hissed with sparks. The arcs of electricity crawled over the spines like blue snakes, hungry and wild. Cale hauled himself onto the first rung, every muscle on fire. His ribs stabbed, his shoulders screamed, but his hands did not let go. The crown loomed above, 30 feet of twisted alloy and crystal spines bent toward the sky. The relay tower's light was gone. That was good. But the Scorcher's shadow still swelled above them. That was death if the rig kept talking to the sky. "Where?" Ryan shouted over the roar, climbing alongside him, her spear strapped to her back, her braid whipping in the hot wind. Cale pointed. "The central spine, it's feeding everything. If we shear it off, the feedback will cook the heart." "Then we cut the mountain's throat," she growled and climbed faster. The 10 warriors followed, hands sure even on molten steel. They moved with the rhythm of hunters scaling cliff-face vines. Cale envied their balance, but he had something they didn't: the eye of an engineer who could see where to put pressure and make machines die. They reached the crown. Up close it was worse, a forest of metal thorns crackling with plasma. The heat seared exposed skin. Cale's mask filters whined, struggling to keep up. Beneath his boots the whole rig trembled, shuddering with energy it could not hold. He saw numbers in his mind, not from the scanner but from memory, from too many hours with schematics, load thresholds, failure points, explosion radii. "We don't have minutes," he rasped. "We have seconds." He ripped a panel open with bare hands, skin peeling where hot metal kissed him. Inside, bundles of glowing conduits thrummed like veins. He found the thickest one, crimson-banded, humming like a heart under his palm. "This," he gasped. "We break this, the overload collapses in on itself." Ryan drew her knife, the ritual blade with the corroded starburst pommel. She pressed it into his hand. "Then strike, Offworlder. Let the prey kill the prey's machine." For a heartbeat, he saw the weight of centuries in her face. The knife was more than steel. It was their lie, their law, their shame. She was giving it to him to end what her people had built on a mistake. Cale wrapped both hands around the hilt, teeth gritted. He raised it high, but his arm trembled. His strength was bleeding out. Ryan's hand covered his. Together they drove the blade down. The conduit split. The rig went mad. Sparks exploded in fountains. The crown convulsed, spines snapping with gunshot cracks. A shockwave hurled them flat, metal beneath them buckling and writhing. Fire poured out of the ruptured heart in a column that reached for the clouds. The warriors clung to whatever they could. One slipped, screamed, but a vine loop snapped tight, saving her. Cale's ribs screamed, his head rang, but he forced his arms to clamp Ryan against the deck. He thought he smelled his own skin cooking. The feedback reached critical. The rig folded inward, collapsing like a dying star. Its scream became a long, low wail and then silence. The arcs died. The light sputtered out. The crown was nothing but slag and smoke. The relay tower's dish fell sideways, dead forever. Above, the Scorcher wavered. Its belly glowed, primed to wash fire across the peak. But with no telemetry, no heartbeat from the machine, the pass aborted. The shadow broke apart as the ship banked away. A hawk denied its meal. Its engines flared and vanished into the fog. The mountain groaned again, but this time it was not death. It was release. They climbed down into silence, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal. Warriors dropped to their knees, pressing foreheads to the stone. Some wept, raw, ragged, unashamed. Cale stumbled clear, nearly falling. His legs shook like reeds. He coughed until he tasted iron, then straightened. Ryan was beside him, her face streaked with soot, blood dried on her jaw. She did not kneel. She stood. The matriarch and the survivors gathered from the broken cliff. Children peeked out from behind their mothers, legs, eyes wide. The ring of warriors no longer raised spears. They only stared at the wreckage, then at the 2 figures who had walked out of fire. The matriarch's staff struck the stone once, sharp. "The hunt is ended." Her voice carried, but it had changed. It was still iron, but the old ritual weight was gone. "We hunted a lie for 200 years. We killed saviors and called it honor, no more." Her eyes, clouded yet sharp, fixed on Cale. "This prey broke our chain. He is not prey, he is proof." The clan murmured. Some cried out, some bowed their heads, but none raised their weapons. Ryan's chest lifted, and for the first time she let herself breathe without shame. Cale should have felt triumph. He didn't. He felt hollow, wrung out. He thought of Merrick, of the Scorcher that would come again with orders from men who had never breathed this poisoned air. He thought of other worlds stripped bare because people like him signed forms and called it resource extraction. He looked at Ryan. Her amber eyes met his, fierce even in exhaustion. He knew she saw it too, that this was only the first reprieve. The fight wasn't over. "You've got a world to save," he said. "We," she corrected, quiet but unyielding. "We have a world to save." Night fell over Crimson Peak. The fires in the jungle smoldered, but the mountain still stood. Kale sat apart on a broken slab, the pendant knife across his knees. He turned the corroded starburst pommel under the starlight. Once it had been a mark of ownership, of corporate reach. Now it was a promise. Ryan approached, limping slightly, her spear slung at her back. She sat beside him without asking. For a long while they listened to the mountain's new silence. At last she said, "The hunt begins at dawn, that was the law." She took the knife from his hands and held it up to the stars. Now dawn means something else. Kale closed his eyes, bone-tired, but some small ember still burned in his chest. Humanity's ember, the one that refused to go out. "We'll make a new law," he said, "together." The mountain exhaled. Above them, the stars of Zio shone through yellow haze, bright and cold and endless. And for the first time, neither of them felt hunted.